John Mack, also known as John the Mack. So John Mack, his name is equivalent with Morgan Stanley, of course. He worked at the firm. Actually, let me go back a little bit. So John Mack was born in North Carolina in 1944. He comes from Lebanon heritage, Lebanon family, and his father came to this country as a little kid. They went to North Carolina, which is where he was born in 1944. John Mack attended Duke University, where he majored in history and obtained a bachelor's degree in history. Oddly enough, John Mack, who did rise to become the president, the chief executive officer of Morgan Stanley, did not have an MBA. He didn't have a bachelor's in business. His educational background is not your typical Wall Street CEO background. I mean, he's not. He didn't go to law school or anything like that. He obtained a bachelor's degree in history from Duke University. In the late 60s, he was working on Wall Street. According to him, when he arrived in Wall Street, he only had $10 in his pocket. He worked at several small firms on Wall Street. I believe he was at Smith Barney for a little bit. And then he was hired on with Morgan Stanley in 1972. He took his Series 7 exam, which is your exam to be able to sell securities. He was on the sales and trading side of investment banking with Morgan Stanley. He rose through the ranks to become managing director of Morgan Stanley. And this was throughout the 70s, 80s. What happened in 1997 is that Morgan Stanley was actually merged with Dean Witter, and Philip Purcell ended up taking over the firm as president, as chief executive officer. And what happened was that John Mack was able to work with him for a little bit, but he just could not get along with him. They had different management styles, and John Mack just didn't agree with his style of managing, and really didn't agree with him being the chief executive, and there was, according to John Mack, there weren't really good synergies between the Dean Witter and Morgan Stanley merger that happened in 1997, and so he ends up leaving the firm, Morgan Stanley, in 2000. Around 2000, he ends up going to Credit Suisse First Boston, where he stays for 5 years, and he's able to turn that firm around. But he knew that in the long term, he really wasn't happy there either. Credit Suisse is it's a company in Switzerland, and it's Swiss bankers. Although he ran the firm for 4 to 5 years, he ended up leaving Credit Suisse First Boston and then returning to Morgan Stanley. There's a book called Blue Blood and Mutiny. It's by Patricia Beard. And basically what happened is that Morgan Stanley under Philip Purcell was not performing well, not doing good. It started off good, but then it kind of went downhill. There was a lot of people that were veterans of Morgan Stanley, good people that were leaving the firm. With investment banks, guys, the people are your assets. So if you don't have good people in your bank, it's going to hurt you. And what happened when Philip Purcell showed up and he took over, a lot of veterans from Morgan Stanley, a lot of people that were there for 20 plus years started leaving. And so the company was not doing very well. What happened is that they called themselves the Group of Eight. And this is in the book, Blue Blood and Mutiny. And the Group of Eight were not necessarily people that worked for Morgan Stanley, but they had worked for Morgan Stanley. They were known to Morgan. They were basically alumni of Morgan Stanley. And they were able to get together, write a letter to Philip Purcell, who was running Morgan Stanley at the time, and asked him to resign, basically, and they were able to get support from the board. So what happens is that Philip Purcell ends up resigning. I believe this was in 2005. And then the board of Morgan Stanley ends up inviting back John Mack to run the firm. John Mack accepts the offer to run the firm. He's happy to be back. And he only stays until 2010. So he stayed through the 2008 through the 2009 financial crisis, but he ends up leaving in 2020. He resigns, he retires from Morgan Stanley. And I believe he goes to KKR, which is Colbert, Crafton and Roberts, the private equity firm, to be an advisor. And then he did some kind of, he was on the board of a Russian company, a Russian oil company. So he was still in business, but obviously what John Mack is known for is Morgan Stanley and being at Morgan Stanley. As of late, he wrote a book about his life in 2022, I believe it came out, Up Close and All In, and it explains his life, and it's basically an autobiography of his life. And I guess as of late, like a year ago, there was an interview on CNBC that he did where he's developed the early stages of dementia, and so he's very honest and frank about his health issues and what's going on with him. But that's John Mack. He's, I believe, around 80 years old now. And again, he's born in 1944. He's from North Carolina. So he felt when he went to Wall Street, he felt that he didn't fit in. He didn't come. First off, he was Lebanese. He was he's American, but of a Lebanese background, and he felt that he was not going to fit into Wall Street. But he was able to break in. Very smart, very good leadership skills, and he got the nickname Mack the Knife because he was like 6'1", very kind of hefty guy, kind of strong guy, kind of an imposing guy, and had these huge thick eyebrows that kind of made him look mean. And then he also tended to cut when he needed to cut something like employees or something. He did not hesitate for the benefit of the firm. He would not hesitate. So he got that nickname Mack the Knife. I believe that was in the 80s when he was at Morgan Stanley. So that's John Mack's life, guys. Thank you very much for watching. My sources that I used is John Mack's book, Up Close and All In, which was published in 2022. Thank you for watching my channel, Power. You guys have a good one. Take care. Signing off.